Don't open the door.
So the other day I was just chilling in my Discord, link in the description, and a new member joined and asked for some deck advice. Now this is a pretty common thing and nothing out of the ordinary. So like good Samaritans, we are in the Discord, we decided to help out the poor lad. And the first thing he did was send us his deck list.
Kill it! Kill it with fire!
It's okay, don't panic. It is probably just a new player who has just been introduced to the game and has never had to build a deck in his life. He's been playing for 4 months.
What? What the fuck?
So after this little interaction and many others, it became very clear to me that a lot of you guys, especially the newer players, have absolutely no idea how to build a deck, and have clearly never had anyone attempt to teach you or show you how to just build a deck or the basics of deck building anyway. So since my content well has just about dried up for the time being, I decided fuck it, I'll give it a go. Now I know I'm not an extraordinary player or a world's finalist, but I at least have some experience building decks. So this is my beginner's guide to deck building. The easiest way I think for me to go about this is to simply give you guys a list of rules or guidelines to follow, rather than me just ranting for 10 minutes without any real structure to the video, and confusing you guys further. Rule number 1. Stick to 20 cards. Now a few people when mentioning this will immediately start spurging out and screaming the grass is greener. Ignore those people. There are a few rare examples where going over 20 cards is okay and can be beneficial, but like I said, those cases are rare, and for someone who is new to the game, who is just starting to learn deck building, for the love of God, just stick to 20. Now a few of you are probably asking, why? More cards means I can cover more situations. The bigger the deck, the bigger the penis, right? Now that last statement might be true, but it's all about keeping things consistent, which is actually the second rule on this list, but I decided to make the 20 card thing its own rule, since it's by far the biggest mistake I see. Let's do some math. And by math, I mean let's get a calculator to do it for us, because just like all Duel Links players, I'm an uneducated moron. So in a 20 card deck, whenever you draw a card, the chance to draw a single card from that deck, provided there is only one copy of that card, is obviously 5%. And the chances of that increase, the more cards you draw. Since your deck gets smaller each time you draw a card, the chance increases. So in your starting hand, after drawing 4 cards, you will have a roughly 20% chance to draw any single card. And in a more realistic situation where you have 3 copies of a card, the chance to draw is roughly 51%. So let's introduce that one singular card you decided to add to the list, because you're an indecisive little shit and couldn't just cut one card. Now your chances of drawing the previous is now 49%. Let's say you add another card. 47%. Another card? 45%. So by the time you reach that golden 30 card deck where you have a huge, massive deck list, you now have a 36% chance to draw that original card. And on top of that, even if you keep it to just 21 cards, that one card you just added to the list is a roughly 20% chance to be in your opening hand. So if you don't want to draw that one card over any other card in your deck list, why the hell are you adding it? A good example of this would be a deck like Dark Lords. Now this deck is known to be one of the best decks in the game, but it used to be known as Brick Lords, for the amount of times it would brick. Bricking is basically just drawing an unplayable hand. That was until Banishment of the Dark Lords was released, which took this deck from being trash tier to god tier, as it's a card that basically searches for whatever you want from the deck. So arguably, having this card in your opening hand is insane. Now, do you really want to decrease the chances of having this card in your opening hand, so you can just stuff in one tech card you refuse to cut? And this goes for nearly every deck in the game. You will always have cards in an archetype that are stronger than others, and you will want to draw into those over just about anything else. Rule number 2. Be consistent and keep it simple. If your deck consists of 90% one-ofs, you have a problem. Just like we spoke about in the previous rule, you want to have the highest chance possible to draw the best cards in your deck. So the aim is to make sure your deck is filled with as many 3 copies of a card as possible, as that will obviously give you the best chance of drawing into them. Generally, the only single copies of cards you should have in your list are cards that are searchable. For example, I'll use Dark Lords again. This deck basically always runs a copy of Desire. This is because this card is amazing in certain situations, but you just about never want it in your starting hand, as you simply cannot summon it without setup first, and as far as turn 1 plays go, it's not an option. But because we have 3 times Copy of Banishment, which can search for this card at any time, using only one single copy means you'll always have access to it. Despite there only being one single copy, you don't actually need to draw into it, so you can get away with only running one card. The other common situation you may see where people run only single copies of cards is on websites like Duel Links Meta, which is a fantastic source of information, don't get me wrong. But remember, most of the deck lists you see on that site and are recommended to you are tournament deck lists, and therefore they are filled with singular one-off cards designed to counter a tournament meta, such as cards like Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. Don't run cards like this. Tournament metas are extremely refined, compared to just the general stuff you would see on the ladder, which is way more diverse, with your opponents playing a wide variety of decks, where cards like Shadow Imprisoning Mirror would be completely useless. I'm not trying to turn you off using external sources like Duel Links Meta, as honestly, it is a way better source of information than anything I'll ever produce. I just want you guys to be aware of tech cards and try to avoid using them. There is no need to be fancy, just keep things simple. Rule number 3. Follow a game plan. Every single deck needs a plan. Not every single deck necessarily needs a win condition, but every single deck needs to have some kind of plan. You cannot just stick every single broken or strong card you know of into a deck and just hope the power level of those cards will carry you alone. You will always need to have synergy between the cards in your deck. Synergy is important in every card game. Dark Magician on its own may seem like a pretty weak card, being only 2500 attack and having literally no effect at all, but when combined with something like Circle or Navigation, you now have a top tier meta deck. Whereas a card like Slice of the Sky Dragon, which is a god card, may have a really cool effect and seem OP as fuck, it never gets any play, as it doesn't have enough synergistic supporting cards to make it actually playable. So with enough synergy, you can form a game plan. Whether that game plan be to summon a boss monster as your win condition like Blue Eyes, or just to spend the whole game controlling your opponent with a deck like Trimid, you always need to follow a plan and run enough synergistic cards to actually go along with that plan. Rule number 4. Budgeting, substituting, and end goal. Unless you are a whale like me, it's likely you will not have every single card in existence, and therefore building the most optimized version of a deck list can be pretty tricky. This is where budget lists come in. You don't always have to have every single ultra rare in a deck to be able to play it. Obviously, you should always have an end goal of a particular deck you would like to build towards. Grab any old top tier list off of Duel Links Meta's website and slowly gather all the cards toward it. But do not be scared off every single deck list just because it runs a lot of ultra rares, as quite a lot of the time there are substitutes for those cards which can basically do exactly the same thing but are considered weaker or less optimal. And this is especially the case when talking about back row cards like Trap Holes. For this example, we'll be using Blue Eyes. Now the best card in Blue Eyes, in my opinion, is White Stone, as it is a card that when sent to the grave can summon your boss monster instantly from your deck. But this card is expensive, as it is an ultra rare, so getting 3 copies of this card immediately would be kinda difficult. But just because you don't have 3 copies of this card, doesn't mean you can't play Blue Eyes. When it comes down to it, essentially, this card is just a way of summoning Blue Eyes, so replacing it isn't all that hard, as you just have to find another card that can also do this. Card trader cards like Kaiman or ranked tier cards like Kidmodo essentially do the exact same thing. They summon your big scary dragon. So while you are slowly collecting your copies of White Stone, you can just substitute any of these cards in instead, and the deck will still be playable, just less optimal. And this goes for a lot of decks in the game. So basically, in summary, have an end goal obviously, but don't stress if you don't actually have all the cards required immediately. There are plenty of budgeting options out there. Rule number 4.5. beware of deck helpers. So this kind of falls under the budgeting substituting stuff, but I kind of want to keep it separate, hence the 0.5. When you want to build a deck, for the love of God, please be careful about who you are getting to help you build it, as there are plenty of people who will try to help you, but there won't actually be much helping involved. The most common helping I see from people is just linking you the best deck possible, like an end goal you should be aiming for, which is fine, and it's definitely useful to some extent. But it isn't exactly all that helpful when you don't own 90% of the cards in the list, and may cause you to start digging for cards that really don't help you at all. We will once again take Blue Eyes for example, and specifically something I noticed in my Discord yesterday. People were trying to help build a new Blue Eyes deck for a new player, and I saw a ton of people recommending Dawn Knight, which is a card that specifically is used to send white stone to the grave. Why on earth would you recommend this card to somebody who doesn't own a single white stone? You are literally telling them to invest into a card that he cannot use. What they should be recommending and suggesting is substitutes, and telling the guy which cards he should aim for first, not just throwing random card names and lists at him because they are the best way to play the deck, because he obviously can't actually use any of that yet. My recommendation when looking to build a deck for the first time, especially as a budgeting player, go find a list, see what cards you have from that list, then rather than just screenshotting your deck and asking people to finish it for you, start by asking for substitutes and budget cards to see what cards you actually own, then try to build some kind of list, then screenshot it, send it to the people so they at least know what you have to work with. Rule number 5, and the final rule. Don't be afraid of trial and error, and do not be result orientated. Being result orientated basically means you focus too much on the outcome of your games rather than what actually happened within each of them. So you may say your deck was complete garbage simply because it lost a game, when you should be asking yourself, why did it lose? Did your deck achieve its outcome? Did you brick? Did your boss monster get obliterated? Or does your opponent beat you purely because he's a lucky bastard? Do not just assume your deck is bad or god awful because you lost 2 games in a row with it. Make sure to take note of why you actually lose, the problems with your deck, and try to fix those, rather than just trying to completely write it off as trash. You could have just lost due to just bad luck, it does happen. This works exactly the same way when testing specific cards and doing a bit of trial and error, as a bit of trial and error is always good, especially when you're trying to budget in cards to see what cards actually work similar to the more optimized versions. Don't just assume a card is bad just because it didn't work the first time, or just because the first time you drew it, you weren't actually able to play it. Make sure to give things a few tries to at least see and give yourself a rough idea of how a card is performing, before just deciding to cut it instantly. Alright guys, that's basically it for my little guide. Let me know if it was at all useful, or if you want to see more guides and ranty type videos like this one in the future, as when I'm out of content, I'm quite happy to make little guides and filler stuff, if you guys are interested in that kind of stuff. If you like the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new around here, comment if you have any questions or feedback, make sure to check out my Patreon, Twitch and Discord down below, and if you happen to have $1 lying around and wish to support me, feel free to click that join button down below to support me directly, as well as gain access to a few little neat perks.
Hey, big brother, can I watch SpongeBob?
Shut up, Mokuba. I'm busy flagging YouTube videos to compensate for the fact that I have an extremely small penis.
Oh.